This is EPL Insights for Gameweek 35. We're just about there. Gareth Wheeler, Andrew Beasley with you, and data, as always, provided by Infogol as you look back at the week that was and look ahead with our best picks and prognostication for the week ahead. The games are coming thick and fast. We're recording this on Thursday. The only game that hasn't been played at the time of recording is Brighton Manchester United. That goes Thursday. But Andrew, we're blessed with football Saturday, Sunday, and 3 games on Monday as well this week. Are you ready for it? For what's to come as we really are at the business end of the season?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's quite an interesting week. I think there's some games where it's hard to find some value and there's not always a clear pick in all of them. But as you say, plenty of football for us to enjoy, and obviously a slightly strange weekend of fixtures with the coronation going on in the UK. So it's all been split up across the 3 days. We have a bank holiday on Monday. So yeah, very, very much an interesting weekend. But a lot of the games I think are quite hard to call. So it should be interesting to see what we both think about them.
I'm expecting loads of royalty or crown or king puns over the course of today's broadcast. Okay. So no pressure. I've set the over under at 2.5. So very modest expectations. Look, all season long, we've been using the Infogol data model to provide some extra insight. And the data has done us very well over the course of the season, as both Jake and I and you have been very profitable on this podcast. Another week of top picks that were made on our last podcast. And part of the Infogol model, there's a table if you go to the website on the Premier League, and there's basically a couple different columns that we should kind of bring you up to speed on what they mean and how you can use them for your week-to-week betting. There's the expected table, which goes beyond the normal table, which the points rank in the normal table, top to bottom, first place to 20th place in the table. The expected table is based upon the Infogol model and their data using expected goals for and expected goals against, and where these sides should be based upon what the data suggests to us. There's also an additional table that's called the forecasted table, and that's where Infogol in this model believes the sides will finish in the Premier League season. So there's a couple of things that jump off the page. For example, Manchester United is 4th in the table, but based upon the expected model, they're overachieving. They're only the 7th best team according to the Infogol model. Same thing with Aston Villa, 7th in the table. They're expected, based upon the data provided, it only has them billed or put at 11th in the table as well. So we look at these tables that are presented. What sticks out to you, Andrew, based upon who's maybe punching above their weight, who is not, and how that may apply to the odds provided on Pinnacle?
Yeah, it can be really useful because it gives a good insight into how teams have sort of actually been playing, what their underlying performance looks like, and you can strip away and ignore the results and maybe get some insight into who has been over or underperforming. Obviously, you mentioned a couple there. If you look at the chart, a couple more which stand out. I mean, both Bournemouth and Fulham are a lot higher in the table than their underlying performance suggests. They should both be in the thick of the relegation battle. Fulham very much out of it, and Bournemouth appear to be safe now. So it can provide some interesting data for us. You know, if we're looking at match bets, obviously in the futures market now, with only a few games to go, it's not as much use, but there is one point of interest there. The expected table shows that Forest are the worst side in the division, or they have been. They're forecast to finish 3rd bottom, yet if you look at the Pinnacle relegation market, they're actually 4th bottom, which implies that they should stay up. According to Pinnacle, they're available at -115 to go down. The Infogol model would suggest that's a good bet because, as we say, they've been probably the worst team in the division. You look at their fixtures, obviously, we'll come on to talk about it. Southampton this weekend, huge game. Away at Chelsea, very hard to call at the moment, but then they've got Arsenal and they're away at Crystal Palace. And even with Chelsea's struggles, I mean, Forest have been comfortably the worst away team in the division. I think it's 1 win all season. So everything sort of points to them possibly going down, and yet Pinnacle have them as 4th favourites. So that might be one to consider. I'm certainly interested in that one.
That's the one that jumps off the page according to the model and data. You're right. Nottingham Forest expected to finish 20th, forecasted as 18th, and you can find them on the futures bets on Pinnacle at -115. There's nothing else that jumps off the page during this late juncture of the season, but things could potentially change. Liverpool still within a shout of potentially finishing top 4. Can they chase down a Manchester United? We'll see. Difficult to wager a guess, especially sitting here today ahead of the Brighton Manchester United fixture on Thursday. But use that Infogol model whenever you can, because we've been using it all season long, and it provides some really real and usable data for your betting needs. Let's head straight into the games this week. We will delve into our feature 5, and then we'll spin it back and go rapid fire for the final 5 games of the week. The last game week, there was a couple games that were made up. Manchester City and West Ham was played on Wednesday. Manchester City won that match. Fulham, with Liverpool with a home victory as well. And this Brighton Manchester United game as well. We did not deal with these games, but perhaps some of the outcomes will be affected, or will affect what we have to say about the games heading into this week. So let's get straight into it. And let's start off with a significant mismatch. It seems like this end of the season, Manchester City on a weekly basis has been playing a team that they're far better than. And the odds reflect that as well. It's Manchester City hosting Leeds United. Manchester City coming up that 3-0 victory over West Ham. West Ham almost didn't field a first team, especially at the back. Whether injuries played into things, I'm not so sure. It was almost like putting up the white flag to a certain degree. And the way the game played out, at times it seemed like the game was over and we were nowhere near finishing the 90 minutes. City haven't lost in 18 games in all competitions. They played to more than 2.5 goals in 9 of 10. They've been the first to score in 8 of 8. So they're absolutely flying right now. As for Leeds United, they keep on getting drawn down into this relegation battle. They're just hovering just above the line. But they have big Sam Allardyce, who's come in to potentially save the day. What can Sam Allardyce do against the juggernaut that is Manchester City? Leeds haven't won in 5, no clean sheets in 11. They played to more than 2.5 goals in 8 of 9. Both teams' scores come through in 9 of 9. Head-to-head, City won at Ellen Road 3-1 earlier in the season. City won 3 straight games against Leeds. Leeds, no clean sheet in their last 9 against Manchester City. These two sides have played to more than 2.5 goals in 6 of 7. So this fixture has been full of goals and full of Manchester City being able to come away with a pretty convincing result. Is there any reason to believe, Andrew, that anything like other than that the script can be flipped between a team that's marching their way to another Premier League title to another side that it's touch and go whether they actually survive the drop this time around?
No, I don't think so. I think you've got to, with this one, it's quite interesting with Sam Allardyce. I'm not sure if you saw his quote this week. He was basically saying he's up there with Pep Guardiola, Jurgen Klopp, guys like this. His record obviously does not suggest that. I mean, he's not managed clubs of the same standing, obviously, but, you know, I had a look. He's played a Pep side, well, Manchester City, 4 times against the Guardiola side. And the scores, Allardyce first, 0-3, 0-5, 1-3, 0-5. So that's 16 goals conceded, 1 scored. He's taken various teams and played City 13 times in the last decade. He did get 1 win, but he also got 12 defeats. And I think the only thing that can possibly help Leeds in any small way is that City have Real Madrid away in their following game. But whilst that might play on their mind a little bit, as we've seen with other games this season, what City will try to do is probably be 3 goals up by half-time and then take Haaland off and do those sorts of things. It's not that they'll be so distracted they won't win. They'll just try and win early and then ring the changes if they can. And ultimately, when you look at without even digging into the underlying data, the simple goals scored and goals conceded, it's the best attack in the division against the worst defence. I mean, Ilhan Meslier is among the worst goalkeepers in the big 5 leagues. I checked earlier this week and he was second only to Bazunu at Southampton for most goals conceded against sort of expected goals. Second worst performance in Europe's top 5 leagues. And I think with Leeds as well, I mean, you look at some of their recent games. I mean, obviously, they conceded 6 to Liverpool, and Liverpool are capable of that sort of thing. We've seen this season, but obviously Liverpool have been very poor away from home, and yet they still managed to score 6. And then, teams they've played like Bournemouth and Palace have generally scored about a goal a game, and Bournemouth scored 4 and Palace scored 5. So it's very, very difficult to see, despite what Allardyce might say about his reputation, with a few days to work with the worst defence in the division, is he going to be able to do enough to keep the top scoring team at bay? I just can't see it. It's interesting. I've pulled up the live odds now. I mean, the handicap, Man City minus 225 was at minus 102 a couple of hours ago when I did my research. It's now showing at minus 107. Over 3.5 goals, I jotted down as minus 113. It's now minus 122. The line is now set at over 3.75 at plus 101. I mean, I think I'd probably go for that. I mean, I wouldn't rule out Leeds scoring. Manchester City don't keep that many clean sheets at home, and clearly Leeds have got to try something with the position they're in. But over 3.75 goals with Leeds' defence and City's attack, I mean, that looks a pretty good bet to me.
Yeah, I just don't see there being a way forward for Sam Allardyce. That's what you call him, so we can get a little bit of respect. Those are the two variables: Allardyce in and Real Madrid and the Champions League next week for Manchester City. I still think City wins this game. How much they pour it on, that depends all about what Leeds brings to the table, doesn't it? This Leeds United team, for all of their flaws, manages to find the back of the net. Scored against Bournemouth, scored against Leicester, scored against Fulham, scored against Liverpool in a 6-1 loss, scored against Palace, scored against Forest, scored against Arsenal, they score virtually every game. And we well documented City's defensive frailties on the back line as well. So the best value that I can find, and I search because I don't want to touch the total at 3.75 in case it's like white flag City again, very much like West Ham. Like they just got to the 3 total, but the handicap for that game was 3.25. It's all about what Leeds can bring to the table. I think that Leeds can score, but they might absolutely get pummeled on the day. So both teams to score plus a Manchester City victory comes in at plus 161. I think that's worth at least a half play. So I'll commit to making a half play on that. Leeds did score against City earlier this season as well. So a half play, both teams to score, plus Manchester City win at plus 161. I looked, City to win minus 580, the draw plus 776, plus 1361 for a Leeds United victory. That shows you where the odds stand at current time. So that's the best I can do. But to your point, Andrew, I wouldn't try to persuade anyone against playing Manchester City on the handicap as well. But the longer you wait, I think the odds are going to continue to shift and not play in your favor. So if you're not doing it right away, then it might go too far out to make it even playable at this point. Is that kind of your approach as well?
Yeah, anyone listening should just pause the podcast, pull up their Pinnacle website or app, put the bet on, and then listen to the rest, I think, because as you say, as I've said, the prices have shifted since I looked a couple of hours ago and probably only keep moving as we get nearer to kickoff.
All right, let's move things forward. Liverpool stay at Anfield and welcome another London side into town as they take on Brentford this weekend. Liverpool's rolling 5 wins in a row coming off the 1-0 victory over Fulham, but a little controversy yet again with another penalty. I'll let Andrew get into this. I just can't go there anymore when it comes to Liverpool, but Jurgen Klopp, a very happy man by the way that things played out and much more straightforward. It wasn't a vintage Liverpool home performance, but certainly a lot less thrilling than the 4-3 victory against Spurs at home the time out before. No losses in 7 for Liverpool overall. They played to over the 2.5 goal total in 5 of 6. Both teams' scorers played in 5 of 6 as well. Brentford back in the business, helping me out with the benefit of a late injury for Nottingham Forest. They'd already made all their changes. It was 10v10, and Brentford with a late winner at home to beat Nottingham Forest 2-1 in that game. De Silva, 90+4, provided the full 3 points for Brentford, a team that had been stumbling a little bit as of late, despite having a very good season. Brentford now haven't lost in their last 3. Head-to-head, Brentford without a clean sheet against Liverpool in their last three. Brentford did beat Liverpool at home 3-1 earlier this season, a resounding victory, but it was Liverpool beating Brentford in this fixture at Anfield last season 3-0. And both, by the way, the theme of three, it continues because in the other match last season, Brentford versus Liverpool ended in a 3-3 final. So are you expecting 3 goals in this one exactly based upon that theme continuing, Andrew? What do you make of this fixture?
Yeah, I think there'll probably be 3 goals. I mean, just to talk about the Fulham game very briefly. I mean, how does a game between Liverpool and Fulham not pay out on the overs? I mean, that
I
was
know
a real surprise.
it was a
Only goal
losing
was
bet for me. Losing bet for me. I don't know if you made it, but I took the big loss in that game.
Yeah, I think I had Liverpool and over 2.5. I thought that was pretty likely, but yeah, only settled by a soft penalty and not that many big chances. But yeah, looking ahead to this one, I mean, I think it's a game Liverpool should win. They have more to play for than Brentford. I mean, I don't think they're going to finish in the top 4, but obviously, if they can win before Newcastle and Manchester United play, it at least puts a little bit of pressure on. So I think they've got more to play for than Brentford, and that means they should win. What I would say, though, the strengths of Brentford, set pieces and counter-attacks, they're the 3rd top scorers for both of those. They're areas of Liverpool weakness, I think counter-attacks particularly. But we've seen in the last 2 seasons how Brentford can punish Liverpool from set pieces, and I think they could do so again. So I'm thinking, as there's no real value in just a straight home win, as much as I do think Liverpool probably will win, I think you've got to be looking to sort of combine both teams to score over 2.5 goals, maybe with a Liverpool win. I think both teams to score and over 2.5 goals at -104 looks a pretty safe bet. Or both teams to score and Liverpool win is available at +192, something like that. But it was 3-0 last season, as you say, at Anfield, and Liverpool didn't have Salah or Mane because it was during the African Cup of Nations. So with a decent sort of stronger attack than they would have fielded that day, pretty confident that Liverpool can win and we should see a few goals.
Yeah, Brentford has been a much better side at home than they have been away. In fact, they've lost. Well, they beat Chelsea 2-0 away last time out, which was a step in the right direction. Before that, lost 2-0 at Wolves, 1-0 at Manchester United, 3-3 draw at Brentford. So they haven't been able to come away with results. I agree with your play. That was the first thing that I looked at, both teams to score in over 2.5. I think this is going to be a little bit of a difficult game for Liverpool. And even against Fulham, without Mitrovic, a team that certainly wasn't playing their best 11, had problems. Just they gave up some chances to Fulham. And there are these defensive errors that continue to creep into the team, especially on the counterattack. That's how Nottingham Forest scored twice against them. I think Brentford are much better than Nottingham Forest. I wouldn't shy away from making the play on the handicap plus 1.25 at -116 or -116. And so if Liverpool win by a goal, it's a half win for your bet. I think that Brentford can keep this close. Liverpool, it's going to be their 3rd game in a week. That's a little bit difficult. Brentford coming off a home win that's pushing them in the right direction. Their play model is very well organized. Like the way that they play, like although they haven't come up with some results in recent weeks, they're still dangerous with Tony. I think they're well organized, workmanlike in the midfield. I think it's gonna be a tough game for Liverpool, and things have been going really well for them. This was one of the games I kind of circled, even though they're playing at home and they've been exceptionally dominant on the season. The Infogol model has them as like the highest expected goals away from home, even better than the Manchester City, and quite some, like by comparison, they both played 17 home games. Liverpool 45 XG at home, Manchester City 41.5. Like there's a little bit of a gap there. Thinking about how dominant Manchester City has been. So definitely goals. It's just whether Brentford can keep it close or not. So I think you're right. The safest play, both teams to score over 2.5 at -104. So alignment there. And by the way, it's very mature of you to acknowledge it was a soft penalty given in that game against Fulham. So
I could be honest. I mean, I complain about lots of penalties that Liverpool don't get given. So you have to be honest with that one. I mean, I think it was a penalty, but it was very soft, very soft.
yeah.
Lucky to get that one.
Yes. Moving things forward, it's the game of the weekend. It is Newcastle and Arsenal. looking forward to this fixture because this is kind of the last stand for Arsenal. I mean, they're far out in terms of the odds. They're likely not going to catch Manchester City, but this was their most difficult game on the upcoming schedule for them. Going to Newcastle, playing a team that's pretty firmly, pretty comfortably in third place in the Premier League table. A Newcastle win in this game plays at plus 147, the draw at plus 281, and an Arsenal win at plus 177. Arsenal coming into this game on the weekend, went out and beat Chelsea on Tuesday, I should say. It was a 3-1 final. They rushed out to a 3-0 lead, completely outclassed Chelsea throughout that game. As for Newcastle, conceded first against Southampton, ended up winning that game in a 3-1 final. For Newcastle, they've won 3 straight games without a clean sheet in 6, however. They played to more than 2.5 goals in 6 of 6, and both teams with score has played in 5 of 6. Arsenal are without a clean sheet in 8. They played to more than 2.5 goals in 7 of 7. And guess what? Both teams of scorers played in 8 of their last 8. When these two sides played at the Emirates earlier this season, they played to a goalless draw. There was time wasting, a lot of fouling. It was cagey. Eddie Howe's side really set up to come away with a point, and they were thrilled to go away with that at that time against a red-hot Arsenal team at that juncture of the season. Head-to-head, they played to less than 2.5 goals in 5 of 6. So based upon all of that, the form suggests that although both sides continue to win games, they're both conceding goals. Yet in this fixture earlier this season, Andrew, there was literally nothing between the two teams. So how do you prognosticate? How do you look ahead to this one and come up with a clear train of thought about what we can expect this weekend?
Yeah, it's worth looking at the Infogol data for the last meeting because it was 1.07 to 1.08 on expected goals. I mean, not sure I've ever seen a tie, a dead heat. That's about as close as you're going to get. With regards to this one, I mean, I'm sort of strongly on the Newcastle train. I think they stand a very good chance of winning. I mean, when you look at Arsenal's season, they've sort of been almost doing a tribute version of some Arsene Wenger seasons. I mean, they've challenged for the title. They're probably going to fall short. And a lot of their problems have come when they've gone to the north of England. I mean, they've lost at Everton. They lost at both Manchester clubs. And while they got a draw at Anfield, I mean, Liverpool racked up one of the highest expected goal totals you'll ever see for a team that didn't win a game. So Newcastle are the favourite, but if you look at the underlying data, their price should be a lot shorter, really. They won this game 2-0 last season. Got a valid draw at the Emirates, as we've just said, had a couple of big chances themselves in that game. So I'm sort of confident that Newcastle can win. That's available at plus 147 at present. Obviously, if you're feeling a little more cautious on the handicap, Newcastle at 0 is minus 118. But I've got a good feeling for them for this game. I'm not sure that, Arsenal are going to have too much left in the tank. They're presumably going to be 4 points behind at kickoff. With an unassailable goal difference lead. So I'm sure they'll give it everything they've got. But with Newcastle's home form, just one defeat all season to Liverpool when they had a man sent off in the first half, I think you've got to go with Newcastle in some capacity.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think the safest play is on the handicap. It's a draw, no bet. So it's at 0 Newcastle to minus 118. So if the game does end in a draw, you do get your money back. Newcastle, the second best team, according to Infogol, in terms of expected goal differential at home. There's Manchester City on 27, Newcastle through 16 games at 25.3. That's better than Liverpool, Arsenal, Brighton, Manchester United, all sides that have played very well at home this season. St. James's Park has been an absolute fortress. I do also think that the game will play out differently than it did earlier in the season because both these sides kind of had really good starts. They weren't necessarily expected to be as high in the table as that at that time as they were. And I think both sides played it safe by virtue of the fact that Newcastle in third place, entering ahead of the Manchester United Brighton game, they could find themselves in fourth. There's a little bit of a cushion there. They're playing at home. They're going to kind of, I think, be a little bit more comfortable going out and attacking an Arsenal side that's shown defensive frailties in recent week. And Arsenal have to go for it, right? Like they're not playing for a point here. They have to pick up 3 points. So I don't think an over 3 at plus 107 is out of the question. at a plus number, at a decent plus number, I think I'll make a half play there as well. So 2 plays for me in this game. It just can't play out the way that the last time that they met. And based upon track record, I documented it. Like, more than 2 goals for both sides combined in the last 13 games. Both teams to score 8 out of 8 for Arsenal, 5 out of 6 for Newcastle. It's just the way that they've been trending. And I expect that trend to continue. Sometimes you're like, no, it's going to stop here. 2 very good teams. I think that both can play with the freedom to go in an attack in this game. Be brave and try to be rewarded. That's kind of how I'm approaching it. Do you agree? Do you kind of see things the same way?
I think I'd probably take the unders in the goals.
Really?
To be honest, yeah, I think I would. I mean, obviously, as we said, depends how much faith you put in it. I mean, none of the last 6 meetings have seen both teams score, and only one of them saw over 2.5 goals. So generally, the games have been tight. As you say, they've got to go for it, and I guess that can affect things. Obviously, at the sort of this end of the season, you do tend to get some strange score lines and things like that. But my gut instinct is to take the under 3 at minus 120. But yeah, we obviously disagree on that. We'll have to see how that one plays out.
It's all, the game's also on Sunday, and I'm betting context here. It's all about the context and not the history between these two sides. I hope that that's going to be the outcome, because I think it can be a very watchable game for the neutral as well. So we'll see how that plays out. That's one of 2 games on Sunday. The other match on Sunday is West Ham United hosting Manchester United. West Ham, as I mentioned, threw up the white flag against Manchester City midweek. It was just abysmal to watch. And this team just continues to struggle. They have bigger games and more winnable games to come, but that's also coming off the heels of a 4-3 loss against Crystal Palace, which is keeping them hovering just above that trailing pack of 5. Can you still consider West Ham being in the relegation mix? Are you still putting them there, Andrew?
I'm not, but obviously every weekend or every match week at the moment, the results seem to sort of tip things one way or the other, and it gets quite hard to say. I mean, obviously West Ham have still got to play both Leicester and Leeds, which is obviously huge in the final week of the season, or the final 2 weeks of the season, I should say. So obviously, if those teams have caught up, then the pressure will be on West Ham, because obviously we'll talk about the game against Manchester United. They've then got to go to Brentford, and as we've said, Brentford have been very good at home, and West Ham have the distraction of their European semi-finals. So there's a lot of factors. I think they'll be okay, but it's not going to take much for it to sort of tip against them.
Yeah. West Ham have lost 3. I do still consider them in the relegation zone. That's where it stops for me. I think Wolves on 37 are fine. 34 points. They cannot feel comfortable right now, and they're not playing well. 3 straight losses without a clean sheet in 3. They played more than 2.5 goals in 6 of 6, and both teams to score in 5 of 7. As you mentioned off the top, Manchester United played Brighton away on Thursday. Quick turnaround, playing again away at West Ham on Sunday. Manchester United beat Aston Villa in the last Premier League game before this week, 1-0 last week. But that's been the trend with Manchester United: win their games at home, struggle in terms of their away form. Head-to-head, United beat West Ham in the FA Cup last time they played. 3-1 was the final. And Manchester United, also at Old Trafford earlier this season, beat West Ham 1-0. At West Ham, things have been a little bit different and much more competitive in recent years. So what do we expect from this one? A West Ham victory at plus 240, a draw at plus 286, and for Manchester United to win outright, plus 110. The total is set at 2.75 for this game.
Well, this is one of those games, I think I mentioned at the start, very difficult to call. I'm really not sure which way this is going to go, basically for the reasons you've just said. Manchester United have been very erratic away from home. But what we can say, at least, is that they've generally been good against the struggling sides. They've won all 6 of their aways against the current bottom 7. 5 of those were 1-0 or 2-0. The other was 2-1. I sort of feel like West Ham have probably got a bit more about them than a lot of those teams. At the bottom end of the table, we mentioned recently how they've scored far fewer goals than they should have based on the chances, and obviously Manchester United have got a bit of a patched up defence at present, as we said. We've also said, as we're recording this, we don't know how they'll get on tonight when they play Brighton. I mean, that's a tough game and a quick turnaround on that to have to play Sunday, albeit it's Sunday night game, 7 p.m. kickoff in the UK. So, you know, a couple of hours extra there could make all the difference. But whilst it's tough to call, I'm certainly inclined to think there'll be goals. Only one of the last 4 meetings in London did not see both teams scoring at least 3 goals. So I was thinking about possibly going for that. Both teams to score and over 2.5 is currently available at -101. Or interestingly, I think both teams to score, Manchester United to win is +289. I think that's, I wouldn't go heavy on that, but I think that's probably going to be the outcome.
I find it impossible to bet West Ham right now. I don't know, Andrew. When I watch them play, it's lifeless. It lacks ideas. You're getting Manchester United on a plus number to win this game. And again, we're not sure what's going to happen at Brighton, but a plus number to win this game against a team that they're either, they could be 30 points better than in the table entering this one. United entering the Brighton game around 63, West Ham are on 34. That's a massive gulf. Gulf between the two, like they've almost doubled up West Ham in terms of points. Going to be a plus number for a better United side to go to West Ham to win. I'm going to take it. United to win at +110.
The only thing we could say here, we obviously referred to the Infogol slope graph earlier. I mean, West Ham are only 3 places behind Manchester United on that. So obviously the underlying performance tells a vastly different story to the table for both these teams. So there is that to factor in. But no, I think Manchester United will probably win, but I can see both teams scoring. I can see West Ham at least getting a goal.
But we should also mention on the model, West Ham United, a lot of that gap in terms of their expected goal differential, they're one of the better teams away from home in terms of expected goal differential. At home, they're bang average. 22 goals scored, 23 against. They have a +2.8 expected goal differential, but it's away from home where that gap is kind of mitigated a little bit. But their home form is being just... West Ham are ahead of Manchester United, Spurs, Palace in terms of their away form. It's just their home form is just really not done the job for them this season. So that's where we stand on that. Let's go into the final game of our feature 5. One of 3 games that are going to be played on Monday night. It's Nottingham Forest against Southampton. This is a real relegation battle. Many people have Southampton already done and dusted. They're going down, and making that argument is well understandable based upon the way that things continue to go for Southampton. They lost at Newcastle last week. They haven't won a game in 9, and they haven't picked up a clean sheet in 8. Have you already relegated Southampton? Is that kind of your approach, Andrew? Or does this game really mean anything? I guess mathematically it would keep them alive, but what does this game mean for Southampton exactly?
Yeah, it's a tough one to call in that sense, because I think Southampton have got a chance of getting a win here. But at the same time, you also asked, do I think they're down? Yes, I do. I think, even if they win here, I don't think it will be enough to save them. I mean, this is basically their last chance saloon. And I think it's heading that way a little bit for Forest. I guess a lot might depend on what the atmosphere is like. Will the crowd be raucous? Will they be nervous? Who knows how it's going to play out from that perspective. But if you look at the sort of form for both teams, I mean, it's probably fair to assume there won't be too many goals. Forest have played 8 homes against bottom half teams, and Southampton have played 8 aways at bottom half teams. And both have seen 6 of those pay out on under 2.5 goals. So based on that, under 2.5 at -116 looks like it could be an interesting play. Obviously, we've referred earlier to the Infogol model and the table. I mean, Forest are the worst team on it. So the data says that backing Southampton would be a value play. But I mean, it's at 253. I mean, I'm not that confident that Southampton can win. Forest have been pretty good at home this season, but then, Southampton, I think, have been better away from home than at home, a bit like West Ham. So I wouldn't rule out a Southampton win, but I think even if they get it, they're probably going down, aren't they?
Right.
6 points adrift with 4 to play. I mean, it would be the biggest of all escapes, I think, if they could pull that off.
Well, it's absolutely a must win for any chance for Southampton. I'm
Yeah.
putting this into a must win category for Nottingham Forest as well. You're playing the team at the bottom of the table. You're right in this mix with other teams where you can really be rewarded by coming away with 3 points rather than one. Nottingham Forest won their last game at home over Brighton. 3-1 was the final. And they've been on the balance good. Their home form has kept them in the mix to survive this season. Although Nottingham Forest, without a clean sheet in their last 13, both teams to score has played in 8 of 10 as well. Earlier this season in this fixture, Forest went to Southampton and won 1-0 in this game. And their head-to-heads, nothing really to speak of just in terms of trends. But before that win at home for Forest, they'd lost to Manchester United, drawn Wolves, lost to Newcastle, drawn Everton. I actually think it's kind of the same logic as Newcastle Arsenal on the other side of the table. I think that both teams need to be aggressive here. And Taylor Navas continues to be absolutely sensational for Nottingham Forest, but defensively, they're all over the shop. I think the best play in this game, and Southampton's a team that's showing the ability to find the back of the net despite their struggles. Like they scored at St. James's Park, they scored three at Arsenal. These are two of the toughest places to go. St. James's Park and the Emirates. I know Nottingham Forest, their home form on the balance of it has been good this season, but I at least think Southampton can go there and score. I like both teams to score at -117. That's my play. I'm not sure who's going to win this game. I think it's very much up for grabs. When you're looking at the odds, Nottingham Forest +115 to win. The draw is +259, +253. I think that Southampton might be a little bit short here because you said it, like they've been a much better side away from home than they have been at home. So I think it's a little bit closer. I'd be tempted to play that 0.25 on the handicap with Southampton at +106, but I'm not 100% confident there. So I'm going to stick with both teams to score. It wouldn't surprise me if either team won this game. But I do think that both teams can find the back of the net. Anything else to add in this game? It's a tricky one, and it could be a really good game and a big game in terms of having implications at the bottom of the table as well, obviously.
Yeah, it is. It is a tough one to call. I've got no real strong feelings on a play for this one. As I say, I mean the form book suggests there won't be many goals, but if one of the sides scores early, then we could have chaos. I think this could be 3-3, or it could be anything really. I mean, very difficult to call. But as you say, both teams have really got to go for it. I mean, a point doesn't do Forest much good. A bit better than Southampton, but yeah, really, it's both teams have got to try and win this.
Yeah, Southampton has more away points than they do at home on the season. They have 14-10, and Nottingham Forest, just by virtue of their home form, 6-6-5 at home, 24 points at home is more than Chelsea at home on the season. Just wild, and better than Bournemouth, West Ham, Leeds, Everton, Leicester City, Southampton as well. So it should be a good one. We'll see. Kind of the game kind of suits both of these teams, doesn't it? So we'll see how it plays out over the course of the weekend. Let's go rapid fire for the final 5 games. On Saturday, it's Bournemouth and Chelsea. Are you brave enough, young man, to make a Chelsea bet under any circumstances? Frank Lampard, just L after L after L after L. It's just unbelievable the way that it's trending. And Bournemouth continues to impress under Gary O'Neill. It looks like, when he was first given the job, the interim job, he did really well. Then he was given the full-time job, and there was a dip. But man, he's got his team fighting in some really good form here to finish the season. So what do you make of this fixture?
Yeah, it's a strange one, isn't it? I mean, who would have thought that Bournemouth and Chelsea would be level on points with about 4 weeks of the season to go? I mean, nobody would have predicted that. As good as Bournemouth have been, relatively, obviously Chelsea have been bad. I mean, Bournemouth lost 2-0 at Chelsea last time out, but they did have 2 wins and a draw from the 3 meetings prior to that. Very difficult to know what to play here, but I have to say Bournemouth at +261 does look quite interesting, just for a small little bet, because Chelsea have been that bad. So I don't think a Bournemouth win would surprise anybody. So I'd be tempted by that. If you want to play a bit safer, obviously you've got the handicap plus 0.25s available at +108. I think Bournemouth could probably get something here.
I think so too. Chelsea, just to put this into context, Chelsea have lost 6 straight. They haven't won in 9, no clean sheet in 6. Those are just miserable numbers. If I'm gonna go somewhere, and I got burned up, it was one of my few, my few poor plays from last week. I just thought that Chelsea in the under is always the way to go, and Arsenal roared out to this 3-0 lead very, very quickly. And it was hoping that it would stay on 3, and it's a push. Instead, they went out and found a consolation goal. I'm tempted to play the under 2.5 here at -112, but I think I'm just going to stay away entirely. I'm just going to, I don't know. This Chelsea team, the way that they're playing, they're too much talent to be this bad, but are they? It's a tough one, especially going to Bournemouth, who look safe now. So no play for me in this game. I won't ramble on any further. Let's move on to Wolves and Aston Villa. Villa finally had a setback, their first loss in 11 games when they lost at Old Trafford last week. And Wolves completely embarrassed, smashed 6-0 against Brighton. Is there going to be a response from Julian Lopetegui's side in this one? Because oftentimes when you get beat like this, there is a response, especially kind of when you're playing a rival club in Aston Villa as well.
Yeah, I think so. I was sort of thinking about what the atmosphere at their training ground must have been like this week after getting beat 6-0. I mean, he's Lopetegui's obviously reputation is built on being very difficult to beat, and we've seen that with Wolves this season, or in the majority of their games at least. Lots of 1-0 wins, 1-0 defeats, a lot of close games. So for them to get beat 6-0, I imagine he's been working them particularly hard this week. He obviously won't want a repeat of that one. I mean, just mentioned it's like sort of there. I mean, 5 of their last 6 at home have been wins or defeats to 0, nothing more than a 2-0. 5 of Villa's last 6 away from home have all been under 2.5 goals. So, I mean, inevitably, I'm looking at the unders, really. I'm not sure there's much else to be said for this. Under 2.25 is -108. I mean, obviously, Villa are in good form. Maybe they could, get a couple of goals and something like that. But after what happened last time, I think, Lopetegui's going to want Wolves to be defensively strong. So I think a low-scoring game for this one.
Yeah, it could do. I was thinking both teams to score, but Wolves haven't lost Aston Villa in their last 4. And they drew earlier this season 1-1. I think a plus number on the handicap, draw no bet for Wolves, makes a lot of sense. Could very well end in a draw. You get your money back at +113. Villa's the better side here, but they are rivals. I do think that there will be a response in this game. That number's a little bit slow because other than the 1-1, last season we saw a 2-1 and a 3-2 between these two sides. So I kind of want to stay away from the total. I consider both teams to score, but I think the play here would be Wolves on the handicap. At this stage of the season, still a draw is not a bad result for Aston Villa if they go into this game. They gave it a great try against Manchester United last weekend, came up short. I can't get away from the thought that there's going to be response in a game like this by Wolves. So again, I guess context is going over data in this context, but you're right. Wolves have generally played much better at home. So let's hope for a good home performance, and a plus number on the draw no bet. Good enough for me. Tottenham Hotspur and Crystal Palace upcoming on Saturday. Palace flying, coming off a 4-3 victory. Spurs coming off the disappointment of a 4-3 loss. Can we expect another 7-goal thriller in this game?
I mean, maybe not a 7-goal thriller, but I think there's a good chance for quite a lot of goals. I mean, there normally is when these teams play each other. Finished 4-0 Spurs earlier this season. Before that, you had a couple of 3-0s, a 4-1 Tottenham prior to that. So there generally is goals in this game, in this fixture. And I don't really know who I think could possibly win. You just don't know what you're going to get from Tottenham. Crystal Palace can play with a bit of freedom. But obviously they don't have a great record at Tottenham. So I'm really not sure which way to go in terms of the result. But I think over 2.75 goals at +103. I mean, I think that's my bet of the week, to be honest. I can't see any way there's not at least 3 goals with the attacks on display in this game, but also the slightly shaky defences.
Totally. I completely agree with you. I circled that one right away. I mean, Spurs is quite clear, Andrew. They simply can't defend. It's like defensive error against defensive error. But when they're ticking over, they're playing back at home. There's going to be some expectation with Ryan Mason there. Last game at home against Manchester United, after an abysmal first half, they created a lot of chances. They had a XG of I believe, 2.7 in that game or close to it. And they could have scored more than just the two. And Spurs, I mean, again, the defensive play without a clean sheet in 8, and they played to over 2.5 in 5 of 5, and head to head, these two teams have played to over 2.5 goals in 4 of 5. So over 2.75 plus 103. Let's make it my best bet. Let's make it the podcast best bet of the week. Okay. Let's lock it in over Spurs and Crystal Palace and hope for goals this weekend. Fast forward to Monday in the 2 remaining fixtures, Fulham and Leicester City. Leicester City starting to show some late season life. Fulham looks like they're just playing out the string, but they're playing at home, and that's generally mean goals scored at Craven Cottage. What do you make of this fixture?
Yeah, it seems to be one to go for the goals, doesn't it, really? I mean, I'm quite tempted by Leicester for the win. They lost the reverse fixture 1-0, but they did miss 3 clear-cut chances in that game. They've got Newcastle and Liverpool to come before West Ham on the final day. So I think this is probably Leicester's best chance to get some breathing room for a week or two before they get to the end. When you look at Leicester's aways against everyone between 5th and 13th, they all saw both teams to score, pay out, and they all but one of them saw over 2.5 goals. And obviously, Fulham and the overs has been the theme of the season, as we've often said. So I think some combination of both teams to score and over 2.5 goals is the way to go. I mean, just over 2.5 is minus 118. I think we presumably would both expect that to come in.
This was one of my worst beats on the season when I played the over last time around, and it finished in a 1-0 victory for Fulham. But I'm not going to have buyer's remorse here because neither one of these sides can keep a clean sheet. Fulham without a clean sheet in 10, Leicester City without a clean sheet in 15. And guess what? Both teams have scored in this fixture 5 out of their last 7. So both teams have scored. It's a little bit too far out for me at minus 142. But that means there's going to be goals scored in this game. I mean, under Dean Smith, Leicester City have looked much more accomplished side in attack, but they're still making those defensive mistakes. They're too far open at the back. So let's go over 2.5 at minus 118. And perhaps I'll have buyer's remorse for the second time in this fixture, but I'm hoping that isn't the case. I remember I was so confident earlier this season on the podcast. Definitely Leicester City, Fulham, over to the moon, and ended up eating my own foot. So it happens from time to time. Let's hope it doesn't happen twice on the balance of the season. The final fixture of the weekend, it's Brighton against Everton. Again, Brighton playing Thursday at home against Manchester United. Not so sure how that's going to play out, but they're coming off that 6-0 victory over Manchester United. Everton, man, just looking dire right now. I'm not sure what there's to like. They did grind out that 2-2 draw at Leicester City. There's no way that Michael Keane can remain in the team, can he? He just looks a million miles off it. A mistake waiting to happen. What do you make of this fixture? I mean, on paper, Brighton's by far the better side, but Everton just need to start picking up more than a point here, point there in order to ensure survival.
Yeah, well, obviously they'll, when they kick off Everton, they'll know what's happened in the Leicester game and the Leeds game, so they'll have a bit of an idea of where they stand, going into their game. I think when you look at the last 2 fixtures, Brighton won both games featuring 5 goals, a 3-2 and a 4-1. Although those were at Goodison, the last 2 at Brighton was a 2-0 Everton win and a 0-0 draw. Again, I would fully expect Brighton to win, but I'm not sure there's anything that stands out hugely. I thought Brighton and over 2.5 goals at minus 101, possibly. I don't have much faith at all in Everton. And then, they played pretty well at Leicester last week, but Brighton, much tougher task than that. So, I'm inclined to think Brighton and an over 2.5, but I'm not sure. This is one where we might need to see what's happened elsewhere, and is a point a good result for Everton or not, and these sorts of things. But yeah, I think Brighton will have too much for them.
Well, the approach from Sean Dyche will be interesting, because can they keep this Brighton team from finding the back of the net multiple times? I don't know. The interesting one is the team total for Brighton is set at 2.5 goals scored. So if Brighton score 3, it plays at plus 142. Like I'm tempted by that number. If you like the total and the over, it's 3 at minus 100. And if the goal total lands on 3, then it's a push. The handicap's a big one too, minus a goal and a half. That seems, if you think that Everton can keep this close, playing Everton on the handicaps to play, I'm just not so sure that they can do that, to be honest with you. This Brighton team, when they're good, they're great. And they pick on teams like this. Like, look what they did against Wolves, a team that's known for their defensive organization and being difficult to break down. I mean, that's what this Everton side's supposed to be under Sean Dyche, aren't they? They should have lost to Leicester City. James Maddison should have scored the penalty. I think I'm going to go Brighton over their goal total at 2.5. I've convinced myself into it. Everton's in a world of hurt. Brighton over 2.5 goals scored at plus 142. It's a big number. It's a big total. But why not? This Brighton team they have so many options in this group, and they keep on finding these good young players, and they're producing right now for De Zerbi. So let's go Brighton in the goal total. Is that an audacious bet? What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I would go for that necessarily, but like you say, I mean, the Brighton attack has been great this season with the various options that they've got. And I think, when you've followed Brighton for a long time, if you follow Brighton, the data, you'll know that they often have these games at home where they'll rack up 2 or 3 XG and end up drawing 0-0 or something like that. But I don't think that will happen here with Everton's defence. But I think it's a big ask for them to score 3, but as you say, Leicester really should have. And so if they can, then Brighton can.
Right. So that's the board for the weekend. Great job, Andrew, as always. I'm a little bit disappointed. I don't think we had those coronation, the king, the crown puns. So we'll just say you're the king of the podcast. I hope that you bet the. I hope that you played the under. I hope that you played the under this one. So
I guess we'll have to crown Erling Haaland as the new king goal scorer in a Premier League season, won't we? After his goal the other night. So there's a couple, but we didn't quite hit the coronation puns, unfortunately.
Sorry, that's a good way to close out this podcast. Erling Haaland, now the most goals scored in a Premier League season. His XG on the season, just wanted to bring that up, is 28.44. That's more goals than the next highest goal scorer has scored. He's higher in XG, which is ridiculous. Based upon this, and based upon the fact that they played Leeds this weekend, I mean, how many does he score on the season? Like, it's not out of the realm of the possibility for him to cover 40 and then some.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he could easily get a hat trick or more this weekend. As we say, perhaps get withdrawn early with Real Madrid in mind. But I mean, 5 games to go. Wouldn't bet against him hitting the 40 mark, really, with a relatively kind run in as well. So it's just incredible what he's achieved. I haven't checked the up-to-date figures, but he's converted something like 2/3 of his shots on target when the average conversion rate's about 30%, and he's up at something like 65% for converting shots on target. I mean, it is crazy, the numbers, because his numbers haven't changed all that much from his Dortmund days in terms of shots per game and chance quality and all these things. But it's just incredible what he's done. And how old is he? 22, 23? I mean, he could be putting these numbers up for the next decade quite easily. So every record that Ronaldo and Messi have set has to be considered to be under threat with how he's done this season and with what lies ahead.
I mean, staying healthy is probably the biggest question about him, that physique, that body. But right now, it is scary what he's actually producing. And guess who he plays next weekend in the Premier League? Everton. So you're right. You're right. Maybe it's a short short appearance. Alvarez, another great option in attack as they play Leeds this weekend. As always, the odds are correct at the time of recording, and please gamble within your means. We'll do it all again next week. In the meantime, please check out our Champions League betting blueprint podcast. Real Madrid, Manchester City, and the Milan derby both play out next week. Andrew and I broke them all down for your listening and viewing pleasure. Give us a like, tell your friends, and follow Pinnacle across their social channels. This has been EPL Insights with data provided by Infogol.